What's going on, folks? Welcome back to Bad Boys, your one-stop shop for all your energy drink reviews and performance talks. I'm Christian.
I'm Brian.
And we are the Bad Boys. Today we got some good drinks and we got some good topics. So as usual, we're going to pop top and talk shop. Goddamn right. I'm working with. We got a couple ones we've had. I know we've definitely had Brian's on the show before. We've definitely both had this flavor of Gorilla Mind before. I'm not sure if we've had it on the show or not, but it is the Blue Raspberry Gorilla Mind. I'm a fan, as you're going to see. Bought a Vitamin Shop, had a really good deal going on. Buy one, get one half off on 12 packs. And for Gorilla Mind, that is a really good deal. They rarely, if ever, go on sale. So took advantage of it. Got a 12 pack of the Blue Raz and the Black Cherry Vanilla. Was looking for the strawberry candy, but they didn't have it. But this is honestly also a really solid flavor. And, when you get two different flavors, you can kind of go back and forth, mix it up a little bit. So, yeah. Brian, I know you got something that's not going to be on shelves for too much longer.
Not very much longer. And it was actually, I had to get it because I thought they were already pulled. The Swedish Fish Ghost. I had to get it. It's a classic. We both loved it when it first came out. Obviously, the deal with Mondelez is done. So it's not going to be there for much longer. 7-Eleven still carries it. So if you have a 7-Eleven near you, go pick one up while they're still on shelves.
Let's pop that top.
Pop that top.
Oh, I got
two solid pops.
I got some.
You got some suds. You got some suds.
Man, I remember when we got that. When we first started using our continuing ed money to buy energy drinks at Elon, I think one of the first ones, I remember you went to Vitamin Shop and picked up a 12-pack of the Swedish Fish and the citrus, I believe. And then I put some White Monster in there. That's how that thing all got kicked off. And then it evolved from there.
This is so good. It saddens me that this is going to be gone. Because it is literally a liquefied Swedish Fish. Now, I don't know about you guys. Swedish Fish may be one of the ultimate candies. I don't care what anyone says. I think it's incredible. My dad, he grew up eating, they're called, Juji coins.
Okay.
Juji coins. It's Juji. They're an old, gummy candy. And then, the knockoff was, and those were, in the 60s. And then they became Juju coins, which were, cherry flavored. And they're, just a gummy. And then, Dots came. Swedish Fish. When he got a hold of Swedish Fish, that was everywhere. Those and Twizzlers. So, I grew up eating Swedish Fish. This is heaven on earth. I don't know if it's just a nostalgia right now of not drinking this in such a long time. This is going to get I don't even know if I'm going to rank it. It's just so good.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of fruity candy, more of a chocolate guy, but I do like Swedish Fish. That and Twizzlers. Twizzlers is probably all time.
You're a chocolate guy?
Yeah, I prefer chocolate to fruity, to be honest with you.
Fruity all the way. Give me the gummy, the Skittles, the sour belts, the sour strips.
I mean, I like licorice and I like Starburst.
Starburst, incredible, dude. Mike and Ike's had some of those for the first time in years. Unreal. Chocolate's just so hit or miss for me. I feel like it's just so bland.
Depends on what you get. I mean, I'm not just getting a plain Hershey's chocolate bar.
I like a peanut M&M or a Mr. Good bar with the peanuts.
Yeah. I think I'm also partial because it was a family tradition for my family to make chocolate actually every around Christmas time. We would literally buy the supplies raw from the Amish. Shout out the Amish. So we would buy the chocolate in 10-pound blocks and we'd buy the peanuts and all the stuff we needed to make fillings, and we would get together. When I was a kid, we would get together. It was usually between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and we had a whole system going. Some people would be melting the chocolate down, and then they would put it into the trays, and then when we were kids, like the kids would take the trays out to the garage because it was cold that time of the year in Iowa in December, and they would like cool out there when we'd bring them back in. Other people would be putting like fillings, so we do like peanut butter cups, caramels, turtle pecans, mints, maple creams, stuff like that, and then they'd put another layer of chocolate on top, take it back out to the garage, and then we'd take them out of the trays and box them up, and we'd just spend a whole day doing that. And so my family made chocolate. Long story short, family tradition.
New French lore just dropped. You're basically Willy Wonka.
Dude,
your grandparents are Willy Wonka, and everyone else underneath them is the Oompa Loompas.
Yeah. So yeah, I literally brought chocolate back to Arizona to share with our staff. It's like we don't really do it as much anymore now that my grandparents, after they passed, and it was just kind of like a few of us did it, but my mom still does it pretty much every year. We even got we would trial certain stuff too, we had our basics that we'd always do, but then one year I think we introduced we call them haystacks, so just coconut and chocolate mixed together into little globs.
Hell yeah!
It's really good.
Yeah.
I think I had a cousin that would we made toffee one year too. That was good. Peanut brittle. Yeah, we should have made that into a business. Honestly, we can still capitalize. I think
you sell that at the local soda shop.
Yeah, I think maybe that's I need to push my mom to
get in there.
Get an LLC and start turning some profit.
You're the CEO of the LLC, and your mom's just doing all the back-breaking work. You're like, I need 10 more pounds.
I'm just the fucking I'm the ivory tower CEO. Exactly. She's there, and I'm here. I'm in a tropical. I'm in the warm tropics, and she's fucking cold.
Her hands are just covered in chocolate. She's in just pain. Her back's hunched over. You're like, I got 2 more orders for 10,000 cases. I need you to get on this. Christian, it's just me. I can't do all this. I don't care. I made the sale. You got to get it to work.
Yeah. Maybe it's not such a good idea.
In some other news.
That's why I'm a chocolate guy.
In some other news, kind of along our energy drink train, we do have 3 new releases that are coming out in 2026. Our friends over at Ghost, Strawberry Watermelon. It's coming out in a 12-ounce can, but it will be one of the new flavors. It's releasing alongside the Pina Colada that we had previously talked about. 2 new ones under the same, I guess, umbrella corporation of Anheuser-Busch, since Anheuser-Busch owns both of these companies. Monster's releasing the OG flavor with a strawberry shot that's supposed to release later this year. I'm assuming in preparation more so for the warmer months towards that springtime. So it's literally the exact OG Monster, comes out in a 0 sugar and a full sugar flavor with its quote unquote strawberry shot. So I'm assuming just flavor shot of strawberry in there. And then we're a big fan of this brand, but First Form is releasing a White Lightning flavor, which is supposed to be a light citrus flavor. I would assume that would kind of go alongside of White Monster. What's interesting about this, though, First Form has a really, really good performance blend in it. It's a great focus formula in it. It's 200 milligrams in the can. This might be the closest that we get to an OG White Monster, maxed out formula, because they're both owned by Anheuser-Busch. They're bottled, they're canned, their flavor profiles are all the same scientists. Do we get a loaded White Monster formula?
That's a good point. I hope we do.
Me too.
I really hope we do. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say.
If they can get as close as possible with what's in the ingredient label of First Form, that'll fly off the shelves. Get it in every gas station in America.
Yeah, I've been seeing them more and more of the First Form popping up in gas stations. So It's good.
They've kind of unlocked that distribution network now, which is kind of sick because I know like, originally very, very small brand, like housed in St. Louis, was originally is more so like CrossFit supplements, creatine, pre-workout, protein, and then they kind of expanded their offerings into like some of the jerky. I know that they're like beef sticks, like their protein bars, those are all really good. And then their energy drinks, which, I mean, 1, 2, 3, straight to the moon. Just watch that stock go up. But as far as energy drinks and their news, that's what we have. So those are a couple new releases to be looking out for on the market. Well, we got some good topics today.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Who else did the strawberry watermelon energy drink? Did I make that up?
Let me look into the archives.
God,
somebody else did.
Yeah, I feel like I've had one before.
Rise did.
That's what it was.
Rise did a strawberry watermelon. Theirs was pretty good. I did like Rise's. I know a lot of like hydration drinks do it. Like Prime does. I know Gatorade has one. I think Powerade has a strawberry melon, not necessarily watermelon. I'm pretty sure Reign may have had one.
They might have. So that's what I was saying. Like I've had a strawberry watermelon. I know obviously Monster did strawberry and watermelon separately.
Somebody else did it though. It used to be such a common flavor. I mean, Celsius used to have one. I think they swapped it out for like a strawberry guava now, but it used to be a strawberry watermelon. I'm trying to think, but
maybe I just made it up. But
you didn't though. You didn't.
The only I'm not
C4.
Super, I mean, that's what it was. Yes. Yeah.
C4 used to have it. It was like a pinkish, like warm red kind of can on that across the yellow. Yes, it was C4.
Yeah, I'll try it. I mean, dude, everything else that comes out seemingly like I'm just eyes locked in. Yeah, but I'm just eyes locked in on the root beer for the end of the year, and hopefully the Dr. Pepper. Like everything else is like second to that.
It's like that's the big Christmas gift waiting behind the tree. Everything else is like the in the stocking.
It's just a teaser.
Yeah. Oh, that's neat. That's great. But like,
yeah, what's in that big box?
Yeah, it's like where's the bike?
Where's the BB gun?
Where's the Red Ryder BB gun with the
where's the Red Ryder BB gun? Like,
don't shoot your eye out.
So I can shoot my fucking eye out. Dude, great movie. Great movies.
I mean, Christmas just passed. Like, there is some incredible Christmas movies. That being on for 24 hours on, is it TBS? I'm going to watch it like at least 2 to 3 times. It's not Christmas without that. The other one that I love is it's Jingle All the Way with Arnold. And I can't remember who's the, oh my gosh, who's the mailman in that? Turbo Man. I know it's Turbo Man. It's Arnold and Sinbad. Sinbad is the... and just seeing like Arnold in there like trying to like be... That was like his like kind of go at being like kind of funny. Just him just being like, Jamie! Ah!
It was that and... Is that the same movie? No, that's Kindergarten Cop.
Kindergarten Cop, also great. It's not a tumor.
Yeah, really wide range in that guy's acting career.
Yeah, and then you go to like
Terminator,
and then like Predator, Jingle All the Way, and then coming back to like Total Recall.
He's had some varying sides of the spectrum for Arnold Schwarzenegger in his acting career.
And then obviously being a governor.
Yeah, I was gonna say being a governor. Mr. Olympia. Dude, this guy's done like everything. Wrote a
Dude,
book.
he was Conan the Barbarian.
Yeah, that was like early.
Or dude, do you remember he had a movie with Danny DeVito called Twins?
I don't remember that one.
It was like a comedy where like basically Arnold was like the good looking one, blah blah blah, but like DeVito was like the afterthought. It was honestly a pretty good movie. It's a very like 90s comedy though. Like it's about as like dirty as it gets, but it was like a funny movie. But enough about Arnold, the GOAT. We do have some fun things to talk about today. What would you like to get into first?
Man, let's get into that. We're smart, so we're looking at a research paper. So Brian sent me this post on Instagram last night, and it was linked to. It was actually by the author of the paper, I believe, and it's kind of a link to. It was really the post itself was a meme, but the paper is actually pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, whether you've used force plates or jump mats, a lot of people are familiar with the metric of RSI, or reactive strength index, essentially jump height divided by ground contact time. And this paper, it's actually titled A Unified Mechanical Framework for Evaluating Stretch Shortening Cycle Function. And the author is Lance Brooks. I think you can find him on Instagram. It's just Lance Brooks, PhD, something like that.
It's so the argument being made that kind of was the basis of this paper is that the reactive strength index, or RSI, really emphasizes the aspect of the ground contact time, and it's not necessarily contributing to everything that goes into it. And because it kind of leans more towards that to increase the score, it's not truly it essentially is saying it's named incorrectly. It's not really a reactive strength index. It's more a measure of ground contact time. So he came out with this study, which he believes is a little bit more beneficial. And when we kind of talk about it, you'll understand where he's kind of coming from, which is the DRI. The DRI is the dynamic rebound index. On the dynamic rebound index, it's essentially the simplest terms. Like if we look at RSI, it's height divided by contact time. It's a very simple formula. The DRI is the height of the jump plus the height of the box that you dropped off of, and that is divided by the ground contact time squared. Meaning that essentially what it all kind of boils down to after reading through it, it's that this is a better measure of the stretch shortening cycle because there's like essentially a threshold that has to be met in order to get a score on this jump or this height. You have to actually get out. You can't have, a ground contact time of 0.1002, but a jump height that's 8 inches.
0.2,
but yeah. And it incredibly inflates the score, and you're at, you have a 4.5 RSI. Well, because there's not necessarily, you're quick off the ground, but there's really no expression of force. So it's not really a strength index, whether it be either dynamic or not. There's no strength aspect to it. It's just being a little bit twitchy to be able to bounce up, right? And remove yourself enough from whatever is measuring you. Whereas like the dynamic rebound, there has to be that prerequisite of a large jump to get out to then measure from. So it's a little bit different. I know, French, when you were kind of reading through it, is there anything that kind of picked out to you where you were like, okay, this is kind of where we can go with this?
Yeah, I mean, you've painted a really good overview. A couple, it's nothing that Brian has already said, but if you look at the actual paper, he'll say like, yeah, RSI, he'll give you the points of like why RSI may not be measuring exactly what we want it to measure. Mostly people are thinking about quantifying and measuring the stretch shortening cycle. He says, first, the RSI conflates variables of incompatible dimensions. Jump height divided by contact time produces values expressed in velocity units, even though in practice RSI is interpreted as a dimensionless indicator. So we just say RSI is like, oh, his RSI was 2. We don't like say people don't say like usually the measure of what it is. So, and then secondly, he said it's not standardized. So I know some versions of RSI, he says, use flight time instead of jump height, or simply applying the ratio to counter movement rather than depth drops. So that was interesting. I was talking to Brian when we were at Elon. There's a contact time setting on the plyo mat, and we were just trying to get
who could have the lowest contact time.
Yeah, we were trying to get like a 0.01 contact time. We were getting definitely below a tenth of a second, and like, dude, that is like a case in point how you can cheat RSI. So I do think this is, potentially a good metric to better quantify the stretch shortening cycle, because it does give weight to
the actual jump.
Yeah, the actual jump, like actual displacement. Like if you're not getting any meaningful vertical displacement and you have a super short ground contact time, I don't think that like your RSI is still high. But what does that actually mean? Okay, you're getting off the ground quick, but you're not getting that far off the ground. Is that actually meaningful to sports performance versus taking them both into consideration? Obviously we want to get off the ground quick, but you also want to displace, vertically and produce a lot of force into the ground. So yeah, it says especially sensitive to short contact durations, which yield disproportionately high RSI values. Conversely, movements that achieve larger aerial phases through longer push durations are penalized, even if impulse is greater. So that's a really good point there. RSI tends to favor short
bias.
Bias, shorter ground contact times, in lieu of actually larger vertical displacements and larger, flight times, aerial phases, whatever you want to call it. Now, at the end of the day, there's nothing that says like, oh, if your RSI is good or bad, you're going to be a great athlete or a shitty athlete. But if there's a better way to quantify what people tend to call, like twitchiness, quote unquote, or explosiveness, or, reactivity, I think this could be interesting. And this is a very new paper. I think it's, just came out in the brand new volume of European Journal of Sports Scientists this month, actually. So 2026. So be interesting to see what goes. Yeah, like this is like brand spanking new. It'll be interesting to see what goes into this.
This is what's neat about this is that, again, it doesn't necessarily shit on RSI. It just like you said, it really shows that RSI favors or biases the contact time or the speed at which they're moving. And I will say this as a guy who loves speed, this is where you kind of get that like balance of like, okay, we're really fast, but we're not moving anywhere. It's very similar to the aspect of like the stride length, stride frequency argument when it comes to sprinting. You have high frequency, but we don't have the length. We aren't displacing ourselves with each of those steps. Yeah, we're taking 12 steps to go 15 yards. But if you can take 12 steps to go 25 yards or 25 meters, now we have the speed and the displacement with the length, right? And that was like the big thing with like the DRI, is that it's going to bring back, not necessarily like kind of flip the script and say, okay, well, RSI biases the speed so much, we need something that biases the height a ton. It's like, okay, how do we kind of like, even if it's still this, how do we bring it back towards that center where it's even keel, where it's really about how fast you can move to get proper displacement. And I think that's what's really cool about this. When we think about this, when it comes to, if we look at like how a research study is founded, and at that very end, it's like, what does this mean or practical implications for the future, right? Does this obviously get more studied? Okay, now that it gets more studied, what happens then? Does a thing like plyomat or the OVR jump or a just jump mat now have that set up as a testing parameter to then use? Does, force plates, that's a great example. Everyone's got a pair of force plates. Everyone's measuring either a counter movement jump to get MRSI, or they're using a box to get a depth jump or a drop jump of sorts. Does this now become one of those testing parameters that you can use in that system? which can then essentially kind of I don't want to say reformulate the industry, but this is something that can be necessarily groundbreaking when it comes to using a test to not necessarily influence training, but again, kind of test training and see if what we're getting is truly enough to move the needle forward. Which, like I said, it's one of those things where, we kind of talk about, we've said it, earlier on, maybe late last year when we were on the show, we talked about like having some pauses in your squats or on like the RDLs or anything, like having a 1 to 2 second pause that removes the stretch shortening cycle. So it's not necessarily you just bouncing out of the lift. I believe it was actually when we talked about rate of force development, because you essentially have that pause. You negate some of that SSC within that whole of the squat or whatever it may be. I'll just use squat as an example. But essentially, you can increase the rate of force development by going from 0 to go, right? So for here, it's not going to be just, can we bounce out of it? It's, can we provide enough force on that? Like you said, it's not necessarily, the RSI isn't necessarily talking about the impulse of the jump, or it even negates a little bit of like a favorable impulse in lieu of the ground contact time, because it may take a little bit longer. This may give weight back to having a high impulse jump or a high amount of like that jump height within the displacement of the center of mass. So I think that's really cool that, for me, I look at this and I go, wow, it's great to see not somebody else just kind of going, okay, well, strength training beats not strength training, or, hitting heavier weight makes you stronger, or, the stuff that always gets studied when people just kind of churn out a study to have a study. This is something that someone went through and yeah, it's a little bit more novel. They kind of came in there and said, there's a hole. Let's try to fill that hole. How do we do that? This is a very creative, not to go back to our book report to everybody, but this is kind of stopping and saying, wait a minute, what's the problem with this? And understanding how they can kind of break that down and bring that forward. So I'm a big fan. This was a really, really good study, and I'm so glad I literally just stumbled upon this during halftime of the game, and I was like, okay, well, now I'm going to spend the entire halftime digging into this.
Yeah, and another good kind of line I highlighted was just kind of case in point, the DRI increased only when the total vertical displacement increased, reflecting its dependence on the combined eccentric and concentric contributions for the SSC. Within each drop height condition, the DRI reached its greatest values when short contact times coincided with large vertical displacements, not just when short contact times occurred, and we don't really give a shit about how much the displacement was or how much impulse and force that you created during that jump. Both at the same time, and I think that's what should be. I mean, how many times have you done an RSI, measured an RSI, or did like an RSI competition, and like people either know how to cheat it, or the people that are just naturally like can get off the ground quicker but can't jump very high can kind of cheat it. And I think this will kind of, because it's one of those things where like like intuitively like, okay, yeah, you're getting off the ground quick, but you're not really getting off the ground very far. Should you have a better measure of this than someone who like spends a little bit more time on the ground but gets off the ground a lot more? I think this could be a potential solution to this. Again, it's obviously very, very novel, but I'll be interested to see. I wouldn't be surprised if jump mats or force plates, obviously, like you have all the things you need to measure this.
You could just calculate it yourself.
Exactly. So super interesting. I know we don't really go over a lot of like research papers here, but this one was good. I think we should.
Yeah.
We could do this a little bit more. I like it.
I think so too. And I think it's good too that we should probably kind of talk about a little bit of the limitations within this paper. Obviously, just there is like 3 kind of short excerpts on this, is that it was entirely model data. There wasn't athlete testing on there. So it's right now it's technically theoretical, if we talk about it in terms of practicality. I don't think that's as much of a limitation as some of the other ones, because it has to be theoretical before it can be put into practice. You can't just do it and then say it's good to go. So that I don't think that's necessarily as much of a limitation as it is just in there to show that that was, completely like hands off, like, hey, just FYI, this is what's going on. It does assume a constant average of acceleration during the stance phase. So it doesn't have the variability in the acceleration of that jump. So that is one thing which can differ. However, I'm not entirely sure if an RSI doesn't assume the constant average acceleration during stance as well, because it's a more simple formula that's going to take either the jump height or that jump flight time versus the contact. So could that change if you did it necessarily not on a jump mat versus a force deck or a force plate? Potentially, yes. You'll see that impulse. You'll see those numbers change. Obviously, with more metrics, you'll have an idea to be able to make or modify anything with that. And as those kind of get put into those parameters on like a test, like you would see counter movement or a non-counter movement jump be on a force deck, and the more it gets used, the more it gets tweaked, it becomes perfected. The only one that I see as like a big like, oh shit, is that there isn't a normative value set of like, similar to RSI where we know what's bad, what's okay, what's average, what's good, what's elite. Those numbers aren't set yet. So I think like when we look at this, it's like, okay, what I would kind of do if I was implementing this within a team, and part of me really wants to, is I would kind of spider chart this. I wouldn't necessarily say, okay, here's our normative value to the rest of the world. Is this data valid in comparison to that? I would look at it from like a reliability standpoint, and I would say, A, is this repeatable across it? And then B, when we self-compare, who's my lowest on this value? That's probably who's going to need more of like either the ground contact or either the jump height aspect of it to get stronger on that impulse. And how do I improve that? Who may need more strength training? Who may need this? And how can I bucket athletes for their training off of this? Which is probably a good thing for this aspect of this measure, from the idea that it can be used to kind of bucket athletes versus saying, it's a test to show that I'm great at my job. So it's one of those things, you kind of look at it, and I'm just starting to think as we kind of go over this, it's kind of cool. This is something that we're in the early phases of this, and we're getting an idea. Us as coaches can kind of look at it, take away from it, and start to modify it to our own needs. But it's gonna offer a little bit of a better idea from like a mechanical lens, especially like when we look at like drop jumps. It's gonna provide at least a lens when we have a constraint of like a meaningful eccentric load, like something that has a good eccentric load that will have to use the stretch shortening cycle to truly overload it, and then provide the displacement. So it's, like I said, it's something that it's very early in the stages. I would, me as a person, I would be on the lookout to see what's going to kind of come after this, whether it be studied again, or maybe some of the force decks or jump mats or jump metrics, they start to pick up on things like this. That's a very new industry, and I think there's not that many competitors, right? If we talk about like a force deck, there's probably 3 of them out there. There's Hawken, there's Vald, and I think, one other, and Sparta. Those are like the big key players. If someone goes to implement this, they can use it as like a cornerstone of, we have this within the data. Likewise, obviously, there's probably more jump mat type of deals, but if you can set that parameter up where they want you to have that in there, I think there could be a really good offering that could get people to sway towards having that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, shit, Brian, you can do a pilot study and be the first one to actually look at it, to be honest with you.
I should. Maybe I'll go back and get my PhD.
Yeah, honestly. Steal this guy's idea.
I'll do the next study. I mean, when you look at this from like a baseball standpoint, obviously track and field, I think this is very replicative. I use the RSI myself. However, like you had mentioned, you have that coach's eye when you look at it and you're like, yeah, they're really quick off the ground, but there's really no there's no juice on the jump, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
This provides that other aspect to it. When you look at this from like a baseball standpoint, do you think it could be applicable, or maybe not necessarily for just the stretch shortening cycle, but just seeing from like an athleticism standpoint as you kind of build that more robust athlete, especially in more like developmental stages for you, like when you're looking at these guys?
Yeah, because I mean, RSI or RSI mod definitely isn't one of like my top metrics for baseball. I mean, I still look at it. Typically, like impulse is something that I would look at a lot. Like peak power is obviously like a sexy one to look at, and it's easy to like tell the players about because it's like a big number and it's just peak power. It's like very simple to kind of understand. But impulse is a big one. I do think though, like when I see someone with like a higher RSI mod, to me, a lot of times, like a guy with a really high RSI mod, it's not something that's going to improve a ton. Like it's tough to take someone with like an RSI mod of like a 0.5 and envision them being like, all right, I'm going to get you to like a 0.8 or a 0.9. Like that's a lot. That's a very big jump. What gets me excited is when you have like someone who has a very high RSI or RSI mod and is pretty raw on the training side of things, and the fact that, okay, maybe we can add body mass and, sway them more, hopefully sway them more to like higher force training. And if they can kind of retain that RSI mod, because a lot of those guys are just naturally, they just kind of seem, some people just seem to have like more, if you want to call it like more fast twitch fiber composition or whatever it is, then maybe if they retain that and we can put more mass on them, then they can be powerful and really reactive. I'm not sure. Like you said, it's theoretical now. I think it could be a good measure. Again, I don't know if I necessarily... Again, I don't put a ton of stock into RSI for baseball. Maybe I should look into it a little bit more. But for me, like creating large impulses, and it's also tough because, again, it's so skill dominant. You could have guys with really varied body types that are good or very bad at baseball. But it could serve as just kind of like an improved metric on RSI versus just like, oh, like it's cool to see RSI mods that are like closer to the, the 0.9 and like the 1 range.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if that necessarily correlates to, hitting the ball harder or throwing the ball harder more than just like creating large impulses does.
I kind of look at it like if I was you, I would look at it in this lens. It's like maybe this isn't something you test all the time, right? Like you had kind of said, you're going to put more stock, more weight into the actual impulse itself, because that's already been like shown to have maybe not a causation effect, but a very good correlation to how fast we can throw or how fast we can swing the bat. Obviously, speed plus mass, we have that, or the force, mass plus acceleration, we have that force that comes through on that ball. Likely when they do make contact, obviously skill dominant, but when it does connect, it's going to be a pretty good result. But from this, it becomes one of those things where we had talked about this. I remember almost, I think it might have been like last June when we had talked about this, where it's like if you test only 1 to 2 things, you're always just your whole program, without, subconsciously, you kind of like formulate your program about only that versus improving the overall athleticism. Or maybe this gets thrown in, once every 3-4 months, just as like a testing battery that you have of like, okay, are we improving you as an athlete during this developmental stage? Or even right now, I can kind of cross-reference this with something else. Maybe it's not and it doesn't have to be for everybody, right? Like some people don't 1RM. Some people do. It can be treated as such as that. But I think it's sick to see that there is, a sense of, I don't want to say like revolutionizing, but creating new and finding those new inventions or ideas to chase after, to have in the back pocket if you need to do so, or if you want to, just to see where you're at and use that as a measurement of what may be good or bad. And I think once we have, maybe a pilot study with athlete data versus just a theoretical concept or model data, we'll also start to get those kind of metrics on normative values and what is good, what is elite, what is okay, what is bad. And that's when it'll start to have like the true utility within like the common coaching practice.
I agree. And I would wonder if, because this model is based on a drop jump, but I don't see why you couldn't derive this metric from like a CMJ, just like kind of how RSI turned into RSI mod for, the CMJ, because obviously like you're not, it's taking the time to take off versus like I don't see why you couldn't do something similar, like I guess it would be like a DRI mod. For just like counter movement jumps, so you don't have to do multiple tests. But
have it become a metric of a calculation based off of whatever it is.
Like we're already doing a CMJ. Can we just get that metric and instead of having to do like a drop jump test?
If there became a modification of it to pull from as a metric, very similar to like RSI mod, I don't necessarily think it would pull maybe like you said, like the timing of that eccentric or time to take off. It would probably have that height plus, or like flight time plus, time to take off. You would probably see some sort of aspect of that impulse being a multiplier in there, and then maybe dividing it by like, time to take off squared and such, right? Whereas just like RSI, you kind of divide it by that time to take off versus the ground contact time. The ground contact time becomes, it gets replaced with that time to take off. The drop height, that might get interchanged with necessarily. It could
movement depth.
I was gonna say it could be the counter movement depth. It could be, that could be a longer formula at the top of the division table in a sense, where it's like time to take off depth plus, flight time, maybe in a sense, whether it be I'm literally just throwing out numbers at this point. So don't think this is like me actually thinking this is what it is, but maybe as a multiplier of like 0.5 of the impulse to get that overall number to be divisible by that time to take off. But that would be really interesting to see. And you would just have to find, I think it would take a little bit of like, at least using theoretical data to kind of pull to get something that matches within the bandwidth of standardization within a standard deviation of that DRI on a base jump with an actual athlete to see what the difference may be. And I think once that happens, we've changed the game.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm probably getting a little bit too ahead of myself. Like there probably needs to be actual research done on the original formula before you make a modification to it. But no, that is interesting because I think like I said, I just think it could be a better alternative to RSI. And it's just kind of a cool idea. Like, I don't know what the history of, like what people, to me, like people don't come up with metrics super, super often. So it's just kind of cool to like think like, oh, like someone's kind of iterating on what like a metric that we've been using and how we can make it better. So
yeah,
it'll be cool. It'll be cool. I'm hopefully this guy takes it and runs with it and is able to do like an actual human study. I would think that he would probably be leaning that way if I was him, but who knows?
Well, like Josh had said when he kind of mentioned this, like these studies typically take 2 to 4 years to be published once they've been done. Mm-hmm. For all we know, he's looking at this from the aspect of he's already in process of doing the actual statistical analysis, maybe even past the actual person study, with real test subjects. So we might be in the theoretical analysis stage or the data analysis stage of the follow up to this, which is pretty sick that there could be something with this. And it's probably coming soon.
Honestly, yeah. So definitely be on the lookout.
Yeah. So that was, if anyone does want to take a look at that, that is a unified mechanical framework for evaluating stretch shortening cycle function. That was from the European Journal of Sports Sciences that Christian had kind of mentioned earlier, just to give that to you guys and you can look it up.
Yep. If you want, I probably just throw the link or the DOI down in the description for this episode too, if you guys want to take a look at it.
I think that'd be a game changer. Enough about that topic, though. Let's talk about something else.
Yeah, let's talk about steroids. And specifically, I don't know why Brian wanted to talk about this, but steroid use by country.
Kind of interesting. So I don't know why I looked this up. I think it was a YouTube video, and it was essentially the steroid epidemic in Mexico. And, I've been on YouTube documentaries so much. I think my girlfriend wants to kill me. The amount of Tommy G videos I've watched, which you guys want great YouTube documentaries. Tommy G is the guy. But then other YouTubers start to populate. One of those ones was like the steroid epidemic in Mexico. So I was like, well, how bad is that essentially in comparison to who's using it in America? And then I was like, well, what's the rest of the world like? So I started to dig in, and this is, everyone is going to get on a high horse and they'll say, well, I did my research. Like, my research is me Googling shit. And this is the numbers that I got essentially from Google. This isn't like valid research studies. This is essentially a heuristic kind of look at it versus completely verified data. But you look at like some of the top like kind of 4 or 5 countries that really have a high use of steroids, or anabolics in general. Obviously, America is on there. I think we're like number 3. Number 2 is Mexico. Number 1 was the Middle East. And that one has like such a particularly high prevalence rate that sometimes it even says like sometimes it's even exceeding 20% in specific examples. And that was mainly countries like Saudi Arabia and like Kuwait. So I thought that was really interesting. It's just, I don't know, like UK and Australia is on there as well. And ironically, like Brazil, that was mainly, they contributed that to like having like the second largest country in terms of like a bodybuilding competitor population, which I would assume, everyone's going to use anabolics in that sense when they're trying to go get a pro card. Well, like, what do you think are these contributing factors to the high use in anabolics in these countries? Or like, what's the differences in them?
Man, it's interesting to me that the Middle East has the highest. The first thing that comes to mind is maybe like more of a Western influence on those countries. And also the fact that a lot of, some of those, like I'm thinking of like the UAE in particular, and I guess like Qatar, like those are a couple countries that, you go like 100 years back and they weren't like very well off economically, and then they found oil and now they're like
extremely well off.
Yeah,
it's
like
booming.
Like their economy is kind of like soared. So I think it's maybe like more money, more problems, or like more money. Now I want to get jacked, so I'll use steroids. So I definitely think like the Western, or it's also just kind of like a cherry picked example, but you see like in the Olympia, you're starting to see people from like different countries, like Big Ramy, I think he was Egyptian. So like more people getting into more of the, just like the bodybuilding culture in general. That's kind of my first. Mexico is interesting to me. I'm not really sure about that one. When I think of the Middle East though, I think of like those countries seeing more like dramatic like increases as far as economic standards, and potentially more of Western influence, especially because how many, like Dubai is like a great example. Like a lot of people from the U.S. or really from a lot of other countries, people are like moving there because of the tax benefits. Obviously, it's like influencer hub. It's
That's actually like a really good point. Like if you look at like the Middle East, like you look at like UAE with all the tax benefits and like these influencers going over there, how much of that is spiking the number versus like that's the population that I don't want to say like truly lives there, but is from there, is that country versus like an quote unquote an implant who's bringing over, like that Western kind of influence and doing it.
It's a good question. I don't know what the population like percentage wise of like our expats are in UAE or Dubai. I would bet it's definitely like pretty high compared to most other places in the world. Like you're definitely seeing more people from the States or from whatever other countries like move and living in foreign countries, especially with the prevalence of like remote work and like being able to kind of be like a nomad. And people tend to, especially if they have like a business, they're going to go to places where one they can, one
Have
where
tax incentives.
tax incentives, one where the standard of living like is good, and where the weather is nice.
True.
Another
If you look
thing
at
you have to another thing you have to consider is like how much are they are they doing most of the surveying in these countries? Because I would think like total. And it's also like percentage wise versus like raw absolute numbers. Like raw absolute numbers, I would think that the U.S. is probably up there in tops. Even if the U.S.
it's got to be
a very small percentage, like we have a much larger population than the Middle Eastern countries.
even from just a geographical standpoint of like having more land to have more people. Like you said, the raw numbers. The other thing too is like an anabolic in the United States, for the most part, is an illegal controlled substance. So, how many people are necessarily out and about and willing to say, "Hey, I'm on an illegal substance"?
That too, or they
Versus,
just don't want to admit that like I'm on steroids. Like
yeah,
it's kind of
because
like
they
maybe a
have a
social stigma, or they got gyno or some shit like that.
or they have a brand and they're like, if you do my workout and take these supplements, you'll look like me, even though their back is turned to like 18 vials behind them with
Exactly.
with 15 needles. Um, One thing to note was like in Mexico, it's not necessarily like as much of like a illegal controlled substance. Like you can go essentially to like a pharmacy and they'll have a poster of like a dude that's just like in there jacked flexing. It's like you could look like me, and it's like you can go pick up a bottle for like $20, you know. So these, it's a little bit more common and prevalent there. Obviously, you know, the common, I guess, like misnomer is that like it's a lot more lax and loose on like the laws of like the medical industry in different countries, but it's very much like, hey, like if you want to do that, like the personal responsibility is on you. It's not necessarily on the government to do that, um and tell you what you can or cannot take. So I could see like with it being a little bit more on the individuals, and I think humans as a population, just in general, every human, there we are more so a selfish or self-serving kind of organism. So that vanity, that vain, that to have that like very good look or the veneer of health, I think a lot of people will naturally just gravitate towards. And if you had the same situation, like if again using Mexico as an example, where it's available, just pick it up over the counter. If that was available in America, I think we would see a lot more openness about the steroids without that stigma. And I think it would also garner those people who may be on the fence and they would kind of jump on that train. I don't necessarily, I don't think, at least me personally, I don't think it's this country has a problem or this country I think it's literally just like based on the laws, the governing bodies, and the social stigmas. Like if you look at the United States, we have a very, very, we're a great example, honestly. Like we have a very big like health and fitness kind of culture. in the sense of, as much as it's going back and forth the past couple of years, the health and fitness space within the United States is very large, whether it be social media, bodybuilding, athletics, whether it be sports or whatever. It's a very, very prevalent thing as a business in America. People want to show the pinnacle of health in order to sell something, make a profit, etc. If this was a little bit more prevalent, do you think we would necessarily see that kind of slow down, or would it spike up, or would it just kind of stay the same and it's more widely available with a little bit more openness to it?
I would think we would see a spike. What's interesting to me is like when it's called steroids, people are against it. When it's called TRT or hormone replacement therapy, people are like much more open to it. And like, dude, like myself included, like if you ask me like, would you do steroids? I would be like, no, like unless I was like knew I was gonna be able to have a chance to be like an Olympia level bodybuilder and like make like a living off it and do it for a short period of time. No, I wouldn't do it. But ask me, would you do TRT? Like, okay, yeah, like if I get like when I'm like 40 and like I
My
want to have
testosterone's
energy
250.
yeah, it's like I want energy like I was when I was in my 20s. Yeah, I'll do it. Like prescribed by a doctor, yeah, sure. But like it's interesting the almost like the social dilemma that people go through and like how quickly their mind changes because with that stuff. So I would think you would see a bit of a spike, especially if you made it legal. There's also probably more access to better quality, and I'm sure physicians would, or there would be people that would jump on that from a business perspective of being able to prescribe like
a true anabolic.
Yeah, like actual good plans that aren't gonna like, or at least like limit the amount that you could get fucked up.
Yeah,
like
not someone just blasting 1,000 milligrams.
Yeah, like people that know how to do it aren't going to be as have to worry about lurking in the shadows because they could like get
be a little bit more open.
Criminal offense. Yeah, like
it would probably end up, it's kind of like the same argument of like, people legalizing just hard drugs or decriminalizing them to where it's like there's a good and a bad on both sides, and either way you look at it, it's like, do you make it safer by making it a regulatory substance? You look at like alcohol in that sense where we had prohibition, and during prohibition it was moonshine, and moonshine was borderline gasoline. Or you go into some of these dry counties still, and these people they don't have access to that, so they're taking a bottle of vodka and trying to stretch it with hand sanitizer or like antifreeze, and now you have this like Frankenstein substance that's even more harmful than if they would have just done the original. And by saying no, you can't have it, it's now worse. But then you have the flip side of like, do people go overboard by using the original substance? And I think that's, again, it kind of goes back to like, that's a personal responsibility aspect, who tells who what. It's such a weird, it's not necessarily a dichotomy because it's not one side or the other. It's this weird spectrum of like, I don't know if we'll ever find the right spot on the spectrum of like, this would be perfect. But it is very interesting though to read and see like the differences, and it's almost like each one is like its own little like case study on this, where it's like highly illegal in America, but it's very prevalent. We've seen success, but we've also seen heart failure and death. It's decriminalized and wildly available in Mexico, and they still have relatively close to the same numbers. It's like both technically kind of work along the same. Middle East, high percentages of using it. Well, obviously we don't know as much information. I'm ignorant on, if it's illegal, if it's not, blah, blah, blah. But I'm also not hearing of, 15 dead from steroid epidemic there,
mm-hmm.
in, more in some of the Asian countries where you can also get it, similar to like Mexico, you're not seeing these high rates of death or, you know, organ failures or whatever it may be. So it's so weird to kind of see that. Maybe it's just not talked about. Maybe it is, but
And if it's legalized, you'd have to think that there's going to be regulations that come with that. Just like saying, like, alcohol, it's legal, yes, but we have rules around it. You have to be a certain age.
you have to not drink and drive.
Yeah, there's a certain limit to like how much you can have and still operate, a vehicle. There's a certain, you know, the companies that make the alcohol have to list like the percentage per serving. Same thing with like smoking. Like you're not like there's a reason like cigarettes, like when you have to be old enough too, they have to like list that like yes, like this product, with tobacco or cigarettes, that this product may cause throat or lip cancer or lung cancer, stuff like that. So there has to be, if we were to make it legal, we have to make regulations around it. Just like when a lot of states made marijuana legal, like there's still regulations on it, and that kind of varies by state. So
the other aspect too would be, kind of, sorry, not to cut you off, but on the regulatory aspects, there'd probably be more regulations on where it's produced, the safety concerns where it's produced, how it's produced, in order to be at least not as harmful, which maybe it reinforces more studies to make a better product. Similar to like what happened with marijuana, where now when you purchase it in like Minnesota, when I lived there, like it became legal, like right before I left. When people purchased it, it was more so regulated like a supplement product, to where it had a full label on it. It explained everything, what's in this, how much of it is in this, those kinds of things. And where it was produced had to be essentially kind of chartered and like essentially looked after, like you would see like a tobacco farm. So would that possibly improve the quality that people take, instead of seeing these, cut or stomped on products in the steroid aspect? And would it improve the quality of life or health of the people that take it?
Yeah, all really good questions. I don't. Time will tell. I mean, time will tell. I don't. It will be interesting because like TRT has become like a lot more prevalent now, and there are actual clinics. Doctors are prescribing it. Insurance is potentially like covering it. But I think it's two different things versus like wanting to get big just because you're being vain or you want to look jacked, versus like for more like health related reasons. But is that any different than like
people getting their teeth done or getting a new haircut?
Yeah, or like just wanting to smoke to get high? Like you don't need that. You may need it for a medical sense, but that's a lot different than a recreational sense. So
very true. It's an interesting thought and an interesting concept. We're here to ask questions, not provide answers, people.
Exactly. So yeah, we'll see. I don't know. You did more research on steroids.
I guess so. I guess I have two research topics to kind of dig into.
Yeah, steroids and DRI.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, let's see. We'll go with a topic that I had. We've talked about something similar to this too, but we had another. I just took an FRC course. I'm sure if you guys have been in the field, you've probably heard of FRC. They have a variety of different courses that kind of build off the original one. I took the FRC one online, and then we did the internal strength model, the ISM one, in person. There was some good stuff. There's some stuff that I agree with. There's some stuff that I didn't agree with. There's some stuff where I was like, oh yeah, hell yeah. Some stuff where I was like, like I don't really agree with that. That doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. So I just kind of give my thoughts on that. Some stuff that I do like and had been exposed to before, especially at Elon. I know Nick is definitely big on pails and rails for, if you want to call it mobility, like just accessing more space within the joint capsule, and then cars, controlled articular rotations for like joint health. one of the things that it's really common to hear when you take like an FRC course is they'll say like you can't move where you can't move. And essentially what they mean by that is like if you only have so much range of motion in a joint, you can only move to that range of motion in a joint. Like if I can only get my arm up here, I can't move back here. I can because I do have that range of motion, but that makes me think of a question. How much do you, and I think we've talked about, range of motion screens on the show before. Are you taking into consideration, like if you say like, all right, let's see how your shoulder flexion is. If a person can only get to here in shoulder flexion, does that affect how you're going to prescribe exercises? Because some people would say like, if they're here, you shouldn't be overhead pressing. You shouldn't be able to get to here. Like if I can really only go to here, and if I want to go overhead, I just do a little lumbar extension to compensate for that. If you see someone that doesn't have that range and, if you can't move where you can't move, is that going to affect the way you prescribe exercises? Do you just say, okay, you can't overhead press until you get that range of motion? Or do you just kind of still prescribe it, but constrain it to a way where it's like, okay, I'm going to let them figure it out, and then we'll kind of work on that on the back burner. And then eventually you'll be able to kind of actually do an overhead press or, insert whatever exercise it's for.
I think there's like kind of two ways of looking at this. And it's like one, mitigating concepts. And those mitigating concepts being you can't move where you can't move, where a coach will say, well, they can't do that, and I'm going to build a program around that athlete. That's not a bad way of looking at it. I'm a little bit more so on like the anti-fragile and athlete self-exploration, but providing options where it's like, I don't necessarily, why can't they move in that range? It's like, is it because they have a bodily structural issue? And I would consider more so the structural issue being more bone than I would necessarily thinking it as muscular or flexibility, mobility, however you want to define that. Because and for the most part, like how much of the bone stuff, this is kind of going back to like that ISA, infrasternal angle, extrasternal angle kind of stuff. Are they wide? Are they narrow? It's like, are you hitting a DEXA scan with them so you can see their bone structure with every single athlete you have? Is it perfect? No, but they're also not going to school to be perfect lifters. The lifting is going to support the sport that they're in. So if I'm say they have a lack of like range of motion or overhead motion, I do. I'll be honest with you. My shoulder range of motion is terrible, especially on my right side post-pectoralis major tear. I mean, if I'm trying to be just on my own, I'm like in line with my head at best. Yeah, It's nasty. It's disgusting. Yeah. But I'll tell you what though, if I get into a heavy push press, I can still get 275 above my head, and that weight almost works as like, in a sense, like a Pales rails, where it's going to help pull me into that range of motion. And my goal is the production of force and the yielding of force back down, where I can get that. It's like an assisted in an aspect on that range of motion. So I'm not necessarily as concerned about it. Now, if there's a truly mitigating circumstance, then I'm like, okay, maybe we go to like a dumbbell push press or whatever it may be, modify the tools around it, but still getting the same movement. But I'm more so inclined to try and improve the mobility alongside that exercise, because I follow a little bit more of the West Side methods when it comes to variations of the exercise and constantly moving things, where it's like, I'm going to keep trying to expose you to new patterns and new implements all the time to see what works, what's more comfortable, and drive continued adaptation. I think you're better off doing that than saying maybe, in the sense, we strict overhead press and a barbell shoulder press, we back squat, and we clean and deadlift. You need to get good at those lifts. It's a lot different than that, but it's also not looking at an athlete and saying, kind of in a sense, like coddling, or like I said, like those mitigating constraints, where you're like, okay, well, they can't squat deep because they have a long femur, and that makes it hard for them to get into that joint angle. now we'll only do quarter squats or box squats because I don't want to force them to do that. It's like, well, you're not pushing them into an uncomfortable situation to drive an adaptation. If they've never had to go into a full range of motion squat, say it's a basketball player, and they just come off a dunk and they're going to do a depth drop, but they can't stick that landing super stiff, well, now they're going to naturally sink. Guarantee you, when they come off that rim and they hit the ground and they sink that much, they're going to hit a full range of motion squat. Are you doing it to make them more comfortable, or are you doing it because there's actually a real reason?
That's a good point. I think that you do have a good point there with like a lot of people know like if you can't get here just like body weight, but then you get some weight on there, you may be able to get a little
get
more
there.
range of motion. Yeah. Now some people would say like, oh, like that's dangerous using the weight to like pull you into there. But they have another concept of like, you know, your active versus passive range of motion, and whatever the difference is, like you want to have that difference as close to zero as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I think I need to think a little bit more about that and look into that a little bit more. Because I think you have probably like a lot of like, you know, baseball pitchers, exactly, like when they're doing a pitching motion, they're getting a crazy amount of layback, like a lot of ER. But if you ask them, all right, do your max ER, and they can only get to there, okay, is that a problem that they're missing, you know, whatever that 30 degrees range of motion? Is that 30 degrees range of motion a risk factor for, you know, a shoulder elbow injury more so than not? I don't know. I think we all know that like pitching is probably not a natural motion anyway, and probably the best way to mitigate injury risk is to stop pitching. But we're not going to do that because you're a baseball pitcher. I think I'm with you. I'm more of like the anti-fragile mindset. I do think that like obviously like you can change some things. Like obviously if someone is doing like a military press with a barbell and they're just using their
inverted bench press.
Yeah, okay. Then okay. Let's go.
That's a lot different.
Let's go lineman, or let's go landmine. Let's do seated. But you can work on that. It doesn't mean that you can't get them into overhead. Do a pull up. That'll probably help you get into overhead, and just like strength training through long muscle lengths is what's going to help you. You know, that's like, you want to talk about like mobility versus like flexibility. Like, I don't know if I care much about flexibility as much as like mobility. How much space do you have in the joint capsule to work with, and then try to get strong throughout that entire range. It doesn't matter. There's a reason why like they brought up like yoga a good amount there, and like how like people that do yoga a lot are obviously going to be very flexible, but they're not really going to have a lot of strength throughout the entirety of that range. Like I would rather have less overall range of motion and be strong throughout it versus having a ton of range of motion, but not being like having a lot of like active control, not having a lot of not being able to drive a lot of like neurological, you know, force and be able to be strong in those positions. And then, okay, if I think I need more range of motion, let's work on that, like on the back end, like through like pails and rails. Like, I think that's a good way to actually legitimately get, you know, if you do them consistently and you do them right, you can legitimately build strength and open up a little bit more range of motion over time. But I think, you know, I think a lot of people look to like things like yoga when they want to get more flexible or improve their mobility. And yeah, you're going to get more range because you're just spending a ton of time passively, you know,
getting into ranges,
positions, but you're not applying a lot of force when you're doing yoga. Like you're not doing maximal contractions when you're doing yoga versus like when you said you're doing a push press with 275. If you're not doing a maximal contraction, you're probably not getting that above your head. That's doing a better job of strengthening the range of motion you have versus trying to force a bunch of range of motion but not being strong through it. I would argue that that's a bigger risk for injury, is having a ton of range of motion but not being strong through it versus having less range of motion but being strong as shit throughout the full range of motion that you do have. And then if you think you need more or your sport requires more, okay, that's something to work on, but don't stop strength training. And they were pretty adamant about that. I think that's one thing that I appreciated. It was like they said, I don't tell people to stop training. I just tell you to, if
supplement it.
Yeah, if there's a discrepancy in like, if you have a ton of range of motion that you don't have, control over or aren't strong in, you need to try to strength train that. So
I kind of look at it like this, like, I don't want to say a yoga instructor, but someone who does yoga versus a gymnast. When you're doing yoga, you'll get into these positions as you kind of maneuver into them. You get real long. Are you reversing the same way you got into it? Or are you typically kind of like wiggling back out of that, right? You can't produce force to get back out of that. Versus you look at a gymnast, very hypermobile. And I would say hypermobile versus hyperflexible. Mm-hmm. A gymnast can get into weird positions and produce force to get back to, net zero. Watch a female gymnast do the splits. They'll be able to get to the ground and come back up to standing. Look at a male gymnast. A great example of that is an iron cross. You know what I mean?
Upper body Nordic.
But exactly. Like, I can do this. I can do that passively, right? I can get that kind of, or even actively range of motion. But you put me in a pair of rings, I can't hold straight out in a T, go up, and then come back down. I don't have the necessary force application on that implement or in that range of motion to do my own body weight. They do. They are hyper mobile, which makes them, maybe they aren't the best sprinters when you put them into a sprint, but they're phenomenal athletes. The way that they can maneuver around the environment in order to accomplish the goal, that's a phenomenal athlete. I think that's like a microcosm of hypermobile probably builds a better athlete, better human than hyperflexible. Mm-hmm. They can probably do yoga, but I don't know if a yoga person can do gymnastics.
No, that's a very good way to put it. And I think another thing too is you talk about, because a lot of people can, mobility is something that, what's a common thing you hear is like range of motion decreases with age, but it's not the age itself that decreases the range of motion. It's just that we tend to move less as we get older. Because when we were kids, like, I can't fucking do the splits now, but I'm sure I could when I was like 1 or 2. You don't lose the ability. He brought up this too. Like, you don't lose the ability to do these things because you just get older. You stop being able to do the splits because you stop doing the splits. Like, if you did the splits every day, like from when you were young and just kept doing them, then you could be 60 years old and still be able to do the splits because you just kept doing that thing and you still had that range of motion. So, I don't know. Like I said, there was some good stuff in the course. There was some stuff that I agreed with, some stuff that I didn't agree with. But I think I think people, one, overestimate the amount of like range of motion that's needed to like play sports. Like usually, like if you can play your sport, like if you didn't have the requisite range of motion, you would get notified of that pretty quickly by either like getting hurt or just not being able to move at all on the field. And another thing too is like good athletes are typically very good compensators. Is that compensation, like the best athletes are the best compensators. Does that mean we just say, fuck it, like they're always going to figure it out? And, is that a reason to just never work on trying to access bigger ranges of motion if we think that's going to help them? No, but I also don't think that you're going to just stop your whole training and say like I think
just work on flexibility.
Yeah, exactly. Like if someone told a pitcher like, oh, like you don't have that active range of, you don't have the passive range of motion or the active range of motion to get there, you can't pitch.
Stop
but
it
they've
right
been
now.
Pitching. Like what are you going to tell someone like that? Like
you go over to Shohei Ohtani and ask him if he can get that active range of motion versus the passive, and tell him, hey, it's over like a discrepancy of 3. You can't pitch anymore. He's gonna look at you like you're insane.
Exactly.
you go swinging a bat. It's the same thing with like the weighted bats, as they kind of use that for like that primer of the swing. They probably get a bigger range of motion as they swing the bat with the weight on it than they do with their normal swing. Same thing with like swing testing with, golfers, or when we look at like when you stretch a hamstring prior to like going to sprint. What's one of the most common hamstring stretches is like putting the foot in front of you, about 1.5 feet, toes to the air, hamstring scoop. Well, is that passive or not? Or is that active? Because you're actively doing it, but it's kind of passive because you're anchoring that heel back to the ground at an elongated range of motion as you force yourself into it. Like all these arguments for like passive versus active, like I think it's good to improve, like you said, mobility. Flexibility is, and people get them misconstrued. And as a coach, you probably hear the two terms interchangeably all the time. And it's probably you're beating your head against the wall. But not 100 times out of 100, I would rather be more mobile than flexible. Just like you had stated, that you're a more competent athlete. I'd rather have a smaller range of motion that I know that every aspect of that force I can apply through that range of motion than be able to like flip my arm around me, but I can't do anything with it,
Yeah. One of the tests I always like thought was ridiculous is like, you put your arms behind, you're supposed to be able to like
interlock
you put one
your
arm
fingers
overhead behind your head and one arm behind your back, and you're supposed to be able to touch them. And like,
I'm sorry, I have lats.
Yeah, it's. I get that part of that is like, okay, range of motion within like the joint capsule, but like to say that you should be able to like and another thing too that drives me crazy is the fact that like, and this is really another good point that I liked that they did make, was that there's no normal range of motion. It just depends on what you want to do in your daily life. If you're just a normal person that do daily functions, you probably need, a fairly like normal, you need a fairly limited range of motion. You don't need anything super crazy. Versus if you're a gymnast, you need a lot of range of motion. If you're a baseball pitcher, you need a lot more ER. So I like that. I don't like when you take just a general movement screen. You check, ER, IR, abduction, adduction, flexion, extension of every articulation, and you say, oh, this is normal, not normal. That is dictated by what you want to do as a human and like the sport you play, if you play a sport, or the types of things that you want to do. An Olympic lifter needs different ranges of motion. They're going to need more like shoulder range of motion than just like a bodybuilder or a power lifter. And that's going to be different from, like I said, like a gymnast or, like a wrestler versus a track and field athlete. So that's something that I really like that they said too. Like there's no normal. That's all dependent on what you want to do. And if you don't have enough range of motion to do what you want to do, okay, then maybe you should consider working on it. So
big fan of that.
Yeah.
All right.
Wrap.
I think we should wrap. What do you got for me on that?
I do really like this flavor. I'm usually not a huge fan of like, well, actually, dude, honestly, like there's a lot of good blue raspberry energy drinks. When it comes to like pre-workout, I feel like blue raz is kind of like overdone.
Yes.
Probably because it's like that and fruit punch are kind of like the OG flavors. This one's really good. I'm not sure if I like this flavor better or like the razzleberry flavor from Rain. They're both very good. This is probably in my top 5 for Gorilla Mind. Definitely not my favorite, but it's probably in that like 3 to 5 range. I gotta go like an 8-7 on it though. It's really good. It's really good. Big fan of the Gorilla Mind Blue Raspberry.
The Swedish Fish. I mean, my mouth has been dry since I finished this in the first like 15 minutes of the episode because it's just so damn good. I hate to see you go. You had such a short shelf life, and you were so good. You're a liquefied Swedish Fish with 200 milligrams of caffeine. The can looks incredible. It's got the fish scales on it. Like, that's a 9.1. It always has been. It always will be. I hope at some point in time we can get it back. I know Gorilla Mind has a candy fish.
Did see that.
I want to get my hands on that because if it's anywhere close with their extremely high dose formula, I know that'll be incredible. But Ghost, if we can find a way, I know Dan, this is his favorite flavor, so I guarantee you he's going to try and find some way to get Mondelez back on a deal to bring Swedish Fish back because this is incredible.
Yeah, I really liked when they did have the heat seal. Although the heat seal we weren't a big fan of, I did like the fact that you could feel
the scales.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
A texturized can that's not heat sealed would be incredible. But I understand that's insane. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, guys, as always, appreciate you watching. You guys know our socials. We don't need to say them again. Check us out, Bev Boys TV, and our personals as well. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if that's where you're viewing it. Subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. If you do enjoy the show, leave us a review. That really helps us with kind of the algorithm and getting us a little bit more exposure, which is obviously we're trying to grow this thing. We're coming up, dude. Is this like our 2-year anniversary at this point?
It is our 2-year anniversary. I know that for a fact because the day we officially started, our internet domain renewed. And
yes,
bang, we renewed yesterday.
Okay, so January 10th is January 11th now. So we've been doing this thing for 2 years now, which is crazy. So obviously really appreciate the support. We definitely have a lot bigger goals in mind, but it's something that we've been able to continue to do, taking it virtual, and we're still having fun with it, which is the main thing. So yeah, 2 years of Bad Boys. Appreciate you guys, and make sure to tune in next week. Peace.